So I work for Google, and if you Google search the term psycho, there's over 13 results that come up, ranging from the original movie, to information about Norman Bates, to its part 2, to American Psycho, to the novel. Like, there's so many different things that come up, but I feel like in everyone's mind, there's their own definition of what a psycho is. And if that's true, then there's over, I don't know how many billions of different interpretations of the term psycho. What is your interpretation of the term psycho? Regardless, let's hear about 8 of them in these true 8 scary stories. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, for 8 true scary encounters with their own psychos, as told by their authors.
The Lizard Lady. So this story starts about 2 months ago at my apartment complex. My fiance and I were sitting out on our balcony at around 2 a.m. when we began to hear the strange metallic clanking sound. We both got up to look and saw a woman walking down the street towards our building, wearing a fully face-covering lizard mask and carrying a metal baseball bat. The noise that we heard was her nonchalantly tapping the bat off of the concrete as she walked towards us. For background information, our apartment complex is on the top of a hill in the middle of the woods, so there is no reason anyone other than our neighbors would be in the area. My fiance and I are obviously a little freaked out at this point, so we hid on our balcony and watched as she walked into our building and out of sight. We assumed she was just one of our neighbors coming home from a really weird party after drinking too much and laughed it off, until last night. As we were sitting on our balcony, our neighbor came out and asked me, "Was that you last night?" After convincing him that we had no idea what he was talking about, he told us what had happened to him the night before. Apparently, he had gotten back to our building at around 2 a.m. in the morning and taken the elevator up rather than walk up to the 5th floor where we all live. When the elevator reached our floor and the doors opened, the same girl in the lizard mask was standing there holding the bat. When he put his hand up and asked her if she was okay, she did not respond to him, didn't flinch, move out of his way, nothing. Just stood there like she was in a trance. She then pushed past him onto the elevator and stood there, facing him until the door shut. After getting to his apartment and making sure his wife and baby hadn't been killed by a bat-wielding psycho, he went out onto his balcony and there she was, standing in the parking lot. He watched her walk down the street towards the leasing office about 300 yards, turn around and walk back towards our building, taking an especially long route and passing right under our balconies. She then walked into our building, and we haven't seen her since. Hopefully it stays that way. Knife-wielding psycho. I'm writing this as my girlfriend tells me the story, so these will be her words pretty much. My job is just to type and try not to screw up too much. When I was 12 years old, I spent the night with my best friend Carrie. We had big plans for our sleepover. We were planning to stay up all night, listen to music, play board games, and talk about boys. The usual things little girls do. Around 2 a.m. in the morning, after our parents were sleeping, we decided we were hungry. We knew we had to be quiet so that we didn't wake them, so we tiptoed into the hallway from her room. As we made our way into the kitchen, we had to go through the dining room. Because we were so quiet, we heard a tapping noise. Immediately, we both knew that someone was tapping on the living room window. You could see into the living room from the dining room, so immediately our heads turned towards the living room. We could see a figure standing on the porch next to the window. Because of the way the porch light was illuminating the figure, it looked like a shadow. We thought the figure was Carrie's sister's boyfriend. The sister and boyfriend had been banned from seeing each other, and we assumed that this was his weird way of getting her attention. We decided that either he would leave on his own, Tina, Carrie's sister, would see him, or Carrie's parents would wake up and run him off. We didn't want the last possibility to happen, because we had already been told to go to sleep more than once, and we knew we would get in trouble for sneaking into the kitchen for food when we were supposed to be asleep. As we walked through the dining room, the figure kept tapping at the window. When he came into full view, we knew for sure it was a man, and we could tell that he had a knife in his hand. The knife was what he was tapping with. Now, because his window had no shades, blinds, or curtains, we were sure he could see us as well. We both dropped to the floor and started crawling to the kitchen. When we made it to the kitchen, we literally sat in the middle of the kitchen floor whispering about what we had just seen. We were both pretty sure that we saw the same man with a knife. We knew we had to get her parents' room as quickly as possible. To do this, we had to walk through the living room. We sat in the kitchen trying to figure out how we were going to get there without him seeing us. We peeked around the kitchen wall and could still see him standing on the front porch. We couldn't make it to her parents' room without him possibly seeing us. We knew we had to find a place that had a door that would lock in case he came in through the sliding glass door that currently had no lock since it was broken. The sliding glass door was in the dining room and right next to where we were. We decided to crawl back to her room. As we did, we heard the front doorknob jiggling. We basically freaked. We crawled back to her room as fast as we could and locked the door. We crawled to her bedroom window that faced the street so that we could see if he was still on the front porch. We didn't see him. We didn't hear tapping either. As we were watching from her window, we saw him leave her yard and start walking up the street towards the main highway. We could see the knife shimmering off the streetlights. It was a huge butcher's knife. When we realized he was leaving, we ran into our parents' room to tell them what happened. We told them what we had seen, and due to our overactive imaginations and hundreds of stories that freaked us out before, they didn't believe us. We reluctantly went back to her bedroom and locked the door. We ended up sleeping on the floor hidden by the bed from any windows in her room. The next morning was a Sunday. Carrie's dad always walked to the corner store up the street to get a paper, coffee, and smokes. When he came back, he was empty-handed. He said the store was roped off with police tape, and it turned out the clerk in the store had been stabbed to death. So, knife-tapping psycho, let's not meet. The black barn with the psycho inside. I work up at the stables on Sundays, being a horse-loving teenager, and because I get a discount on my livery fees. A few months ago in January, something rather disturbing happened, which scarred me and my horse for life. I was doing my usual morning job of tacking up when a guy who isn't a rider walks into the yard and approaches my trainer and the yard owner. They start talking, and a few more people join them. They all look worried, and the guy is holding up a piece of paper. A few minutes later, my trainer rushes over to me and explains what this guy said. Apparently, a man had gone missing, but his dog had been spotted up by a black barn in the middle of two fields, which is a place where both me and my friend ride a lot, as crossing the fields and using the bridleway is quicker than the road. It isn't accessible by the road, so he wants riders to go up there to see if this man and also a dog are up there. Apparently, this guy who went missing is a bit odd, and has told us not to approach him, only to ring the police if he is there, and to stay up there to surround him if he is not armed. My trainer then says I have to go up with some of the other liveries, and the workers as well, as she needs to stay and teach and look after the younger stable girls. I agree and set off to tack up my horse, Silver. A bit of information. Silver is not a big horse, and is very petite in its build. He is an Arab crossed with a thoroughbred and an ex-racehorse, meaning he can put on some speed and can be very flighty, despite being 22 years old. I am not a big person, only about 5'5", and I look mature for my 17 years. Skip forward about 30 minutes, and I'm galloping along the bridle path. I see the barn up ahead, surrounded by stubble fields, which haven't been dug up yet. It just gives me chills seeing it. It looks so out of place up there, so unnatural. I hear a dog barking up there, and red flags start waving in my brain. It could just be a dog out with its owner, but it does seem to come from the barn. The other riders spread out and ride across the field slowly. We are approaching at just about a trot. Silver, not wanting to stay in a walk out of nerves. I was the first person to ride around to the open side of the barn. I suppose I was perhaps the stupidest one to go first, or the only one whose horse isn't scared of dogs, as the other horses were getting nervous from the barking. What I notice as I start walking around there is the dog is whimpering now rather than barking. Also, Silver is being very hesitant, whilst a few minutes ago he was pacing along rather fast. He had his ears forward and was craning his neck to see what was there. What happened next? I was not expecting. This guy burst out, yelling and cursing at me, waving this kitchen knife at me. I scream as Silver just bolts, ears back and absolutely thundering along like his tail is on fire. I am crying, terrified that this guy has a gun as well, that the other riders will be subject to this psycho. Silver would not stop, and was pulling so hard at the reins that my arms were aching from trying to steady him up. I kept glancing back, and I saw horses retreating quickly. I guess they heard me scream and knew that the guy was there. We kept galloping, even when crossing the road, until Silver was blowing and foaming at the mouth. We were now at a concrete track, which went down between two fields. I was well away from the barn now, and my heart was just about still in my chest. I dismounted and held Silver whilst I called my friend, and this is where I will let her details take over. Apparently, upon hearing me scream and seeing my horse take off, everyone knew the guy was there. He came around the side and started cursing at all of them, telling them it was his fault he was there and that he would kill them all, and various other obscenities. The police were called and came screaming down the road and managed to get over him by running through this massive field. He was now in the back of the car, and apparently the police took the dog as well. I ended up walking halfway home leading Silver. He was so tired that when I rode him the halfway, he couldn't go faster than a walk. Poor horse. I couldn't stop thinking about what would have happened if the guy had a gun, if I wasn't on a horse, and if we riders hadn't gone up to find that bastard. I am ever grateful to Silver for running away and not bucking me off. Without him, I would be either injured or dead. Silver will never go in that field now, no matter how much I try and make him. To be honest, even I hate riding past it, and will go the long way on the road. So, creepy guy in the black barn, let's hope both Silver and myself never ever meet you again. I'm sitting next to a psycho. This is probably the second time I've checked this place out and finally subscribed. I've met many strange people during my lifetime, and this encounter takes the cake. This story has to do with a squatter originally from Wisconsin, and I sat next to her on a Greyhound bus to Huntington, West Virginia. To begin, I'm used to always getting a seat by myself, because people from Pittsburgh are of our own breed. We don't like sharing seats with people who could intentionally kill us. Most anyone would agree that sharing a seat with a squatter is going to make you have a bad time. I was on the bus in no time, with my laptop set and browsing the web for randomness, when I look up and see this haggard woman enter the bus and look straight at me and the empty seat beside me, although there were plenty of other seats available. I tried not to make eye contact and shifted my weight as if to say no. Both of these seats are taken. She didn't get the hint. I could literally smell her from where she was standing, and there was no way in hell I was going to sit next to that for the next 10 hours. Or so I thought. She decided to make a beeline straight towards me and plop down, odor and all. She didn't even have enough courtesy to ask if it was taken or if she was bothering me. I was so pissed off. She could have taken the seat right across from me, but I figured she wanted someone to talk to on the way down. I'm usually the nicest girl you'd ever meet, but I don't fare well with people who have no manners, such as the new arrival. She began to introduce herself, and I could see the dirt encrusted under her fingernails and what seemed like dried up blood around her lips. I was mortified. I couldn't bring myself to shake her hand, but I did say hello. I believe her name was Anna or something. Anyways, her clothes were as muddy brown as the river surrounding Pittsburgh, and I knew something was up. She told me she was a squatter from an abandoned house in the South Hills for 2 years, used meth, coke, and became pregnant, and that's why she was on the run. The whole thing sounded weird. Why was she on the run? That's the only question running through my head when I start feeling the stabbing pains in my stomach from not eating breakfast before leaving. Honestly, I forgot about her long enough to reach into my bag and pull a little bag of chips, in which I saw her gawking at. I felt horrible and decided to share them with her, even though the events of my trip were gonna take a drastic turn. She polished off my whole bag and fell asleep. I, really examining her now, noticed a very peculiar gash in her neck. Why the hell was there a cut that size circling half her neck, and why didn't I notice when she sat down? That's when I saw the handle of something in her bag. I didn't know what it was, and my imagination ran wild. About 30 minutes later, we arrived in Zanesville, Ohio, and my nerves were at their thinnest by this point. I woke her up and told her that we were at a rest stop, and she jetted off the bus. Knowing she was gone and would never know, I took a better look at what was inside her bag. To my unfortunate surprise, it was a gigantic chef's knife. It had to have been at least 12 inches long and 4 inches wide. I then proceeded to freak the hell out. Here, I am sitting next to a homeless, pregnant woman, and she has a knife and gashes on her body. She didn't seem to right in the head as was. I started thinking about where she could have possibly gotten the money to ride the bus at all, and everything clicked. Needless to say, when she got back on the bus, I finally moved my stuff to the back and made my nest there. She looked around for me, but I dunked down until she sat down and finally fell asleep again. Coast clear, or so I thought. For a while, I was listening to music and browsing the web, but felt sleep taking over me. I didn't think it would hurt to doze off, but kept seeing that knife in the back of my mind, and was sure as hell not sleeping the rest of the 6 hours I had left with that woman sitting so close to me. I admit, I was paranoid, but for good reason. I then hear the woman mumbling in her sleep, and what I heard next, I'll never forget. She'll die. I just about enough, and knew the homeless addict wasn't pregnant. She was insane. I got off the bus in Columbus and made my way towards my next destination, and could see that the woman was running to the exit when security had stopped her. I, being nosy, got close enough to hear the conversation. Someone had called the police over her doing something before she left Pittsburgh, via stabbing a man and taking his wallet. It was probably the person she had stabbed, and once again everything clicked. The gash from her neck was him fighting back, and the blade was the weapon she used to take that man's wallet to pay for a ticket out of there. I knew something wasn't right the minute she told me her story. Eventually, police showed up and carted her away while I watched. My only thoughts at the time were that I could have been next. When I reached my destination, I flipped on the TV at my mother's house to see if anything showed up on the news about it. Nothing. During my whole vacation, not once was it mentioned. I even went on the web to see if Pittsburgh News had reported about it. All efforts were useless. So now you know. Never trust anyone on a bus. Devil Incarnate Grandmother and Psycho Rednecks. Hi. This is my first time posting here. I'm not a very good writer, and not very good at explaining things, but I really wanted to share. Sorry if this is long, but so much shit has happened to me. A while ago, Me and my mom, Elise, had gotten out of a harsh situation. At the time, I was a 9-year-old girl, although currently I am making progress towards feeling comfortable in my own skin and transitioning, and my mom was looking to start dating again. After a while, she had met someone. I did not mind him, and eventually, we moved in with this guy. Kieran, my mom's new boyfriend, quickly started to be a creep. He started doing stupid shit. When we were setting up our Christmas tree, he was purposely knocking down and destroying some of my mom's antique bulbs. Later that night, sitting on the couch, he told me that him and my mom aren't compatible. In front of her and my mom around here starts thinking, oh shit. Either way, life goes on. Things with Kieran get worse. His behavior slowly starts to get extreme. He fought with my mom a lot for no reason. I was now 10 around this time. One night, I found him in the garage, sifting around in my mom's car. He told me he was looking for headache medicine when I caught him, but my gut told me he wasn't. Not long after that incident, I found him in her office rummaging through her purse. I asked him what he was doing. He gave me the same excuse, but I knew he was lying. More time passed. I was about 11 years old now. I would sometimes be under my bed. Kieran spent a lot of time in the basement. One day I could hear him through the vent on my floor under my bed, talking on the phone to my grandmother Beth. I accidentally moved and made a noise against the vent, which he heard from the basement. He went silent, and stayed silent for a long time. Eventually, I left my room and went outside out of fear of him confronting me. Things only got worse. Kieran had a friend named Tim. I got pedo vibes from this guy, and got vibes that he was generally shady as fuck. I never really trusted him. One night I was standing on the porch and I heard someone step on the driveway. We have a lot of animals in the area and a coyote pack that howled every night, but I knew the difference between a human step and an animal. I went inside. I haven't stopped believing it was Tim. Later, I had one of my BFFs over. We were walking around in the woods, acting like we were hunting for dragons. It was fun. Until we had to come to this one part of the yard. It was a small clearing surrounded by the dense forest that the property was on. Suddenly, 2 figures sped past me and my BFF. We were both terrified, and we both knew they were people. Kieran was nowhere to be found in the house. I don't know why the fuck him and his creeper friend were running around in the woods. This was a normal occurrence anyways. He would stalk me and my mother from the forest. He would literally stand in the pool we had set up in the yard and stare into the house at us. My mother always felt him watching, and so did I. He would be a creeper up close, often coming into the bathroom when I was naked and taking a bath, giving no warning before entering. He'd make an excuse for why he was in there, look at me, and then leave. Kieran did not stop being a fucking psycho. He accused my mom of being a waster, and so she spitefully took a half-full gallon of milk and started pouring it down the drain. Kieran lost his shit and violently grabbed her by the wrist and started hitting her. I was trembling, watching it, and screaming that I was going to call 911. I had the phone in my hand. My mom told me to go to my room. She later came to me and urged me not to call. She had her reasons, and I understood. The cops wouldn't do shit for us. My mother was scared for my life as well as her own. Every day we were terrified. One day we timed how long it took Kieran to start complaining about shit after he got home. It took him 17 seconds, by the way. Eventually we left, and Granny Beth argued with the legal help about if we really needed to move or not. The man told her that Kieran was eventually going to kill us, and that nobody would ever find our bodies. Fast forward, we moved back to where my grandmother Beth lives, the general area. We think we are free from trauma and abuse. We were mistaken. Eventually, I found out that Granny Beth had kept us in that shit situation with Kieran. She spoon-fed him lies to make him violent towards us. She made him do things. She supported him. She was angry when we got out, and she was going to express it. Beth is a terrifying manipulator, and I sadly found out the hard way. My aunt and uncle. My uncle would already come and randomly scream at us when we were living with Kieran, would spit at my mother and accuse her of things that aren't true. My aunt is a fucking parrot for my granny Beth. She will repeat any conversation she has with my mom back to Beth. Beth will, of course, reward my uncle for being her white knight by paying for stainless steel appliances, a new car, 2 new tractors, etc. We moved in. I was now 12 years old. I had a bad feeling in my gut. I went downstairs and opened the basement door to see my aunt messing with the heating stuff. She started being really sheepish when I asked what she was doing and brushed it off. Eventually, she left the basement. I didn't think to snoop around with what she was doing as I didn't know much about heating and stuff, so I ignored it. My uncle ended up calling me a little bitch, so my mom kicked him out of the house along with Beth. And that was that. A few days later, my mom starts acting strange. She thinks she's going crazy. I assure her nothing is wrong, and time goes by. One night we were preparing dinner and Mom says she smelled something weird and somehow immediately picked out that it was a gas leak. We evacuated the house and called someone to help us. The man was very polite. He entered the basement and his CO2 detector was going nuts. We came to find out that someone had blown out the pilot light. The memory of my aunt acting sheepish in the building came to mind and I felt sick. I still feel sick knowing that my own grandmother almost killed us and made it look like an accident, getting my own family to do her sick bidding for treats and rewards. My uncle sometimes finds my mother's social media accounts and sends her harassing texts. He'd drive by our house. Grandma Beth would drive by our house as well. We eventually had to change our locks because she'd given the family keys to our fucking house and we had found evidence that she had people coming in while we were gone. She called my mother as well as me whores, even though I was only 14 years old, and she's lied to us about the entire family. She has done so many disgusting things, and sometimes I still think I'm a crazy person and the real bad guy. I'm a 19-year-old guy now, and I moved away. But I'll never forget what a fucking weirdo my grandmother was. I'm so glad to be out of the prison that she made life into. It was a terrifying experience for me. So I think this subreddit might find it creepy too. So to my fiendish granny and Kieran, I hope to God we never meet again. From mutual friend to psycho killer. Now, I have my share of paranormal stories, but I also have a good portion of downright creepy, real human being encounters. All in all, I have so many frickin' stories that I should write a book, right? Anyways, hope you like this one too. I was probably 19 years old, and I had just gotten out of a bad relationship. I was looking for new people to get my mind off the abuse. It was awful. A week or two after my breakup, I get a random friend request on Facebook. David wants to be your friend. We had 4 friends in common. I went to school with all these people, so I assumed it would be safe to add him. What harm could come of it? Moments later, I get an IM. Hey Katie, I'm David. How are you? I love your pictures. You are quite beautiful. Okay, I was a very naive person in high school, so my initial thought was, oh, how lovely, a compliment. I thanked him and continued to make small talk. After a few weeks of chatting, he asked for my phone number. He was a really nice guy, and I'd gone to church with my friends. I never did ask my friends about him, or even clarify that they all went to church together. So I gave him my number without hesitation. Yes, I know. It was a very dumb move. No longer than 5 minutes later, I start getting a phone call. Unable to recognize the number, I ignored it and let it go to voicemail. Keep in mind that David and I are still talking on Facebook, and there's no inkling that he wants to text or call me. My voicemail icon starts blinking. I get a shiver down my spine, and I'm thinking to myself, do I really want to listen to this? I cave in. Hey Katie, it's David. God, that voice was so deep and murderous. I just wanted to call you to see how you were and hear your beautiful voice. Alright, talk to you later. Don't forget to call back. Bye, gorgeous. And that's the end of it. I sent him an I am about it. Why did you call me? He responds with, I wanted to hear your voice, your breath, and your beauty. At this point, I'm a little creeped out, but I brush it off as nerves. He calls me again that night, so I pick up. Hey Katie, it's David. I sigh. We start talking about his job, his faith in God, very, very strong faith, so he claims, avid Bible reader, etc. After a few minutes, he begins to tell me that he'd like to court me. Having been homeschooled for a part of my life in a Christian group, I knew that meant being supervised by parents getting married and pregnant early on in life, and I wanted no fucking part of that. After telling him that it wasn't a good idea to date, he begins to tell me yet again that he wants to court me, love me, and move down to be closer to me. Even if that meant just being friends, I continue to tell him that it's a bad idea, and it's as if he can't even hear me. He tells me that he found a place near the church and he'll be moving in March of the next year. After this little conversation, I disable him from messaging me, and I deleted his number. A few days later, David calls again. I promptly ignored it, and I get yet another voicemail. It's the same thing over and over again. Hey Katie, it's David. Why did that little introduction always creep me out? He would always leave messages about how much he cared for me, how he missed me, and the sound of my voice, blah blah blah. This went on for weeks, and in that span of time, I met my boyfriend, current fiance Eric. Eric and I began talking in late October, early November. In December, roughly 4 to 5 weeks after I had stopped talking to David, I changed my relationship status to in a relationship. I get a mass of furious texts. You harlot. I told you we were going to be together. You told me I had a chance if I ever moved down there to be closer to you, you stupid bitch. Going to hell for smiting me. The list goes on and on. Then came the voicemails. You're a fucking bitch. God will make sure you're in pits of hell for what you did to me. You led me on. You broke my heart into a million pieces, and you'll go to hell for it. Before I can finish the VM, my phone starts ringing. Eric snatched it away from me and answered. Eric is a 6'4" to 6'5", broadly built man. He had the build of a soldier, penetrating, brown eyes, dark buzzed haircut, a deep, intimidating voice, and is extremely protective. Needless to say, he's not the kind of guy you want to piss off. Initially, Eric is very calm with David. He tells me never to contact me again in any form. David doesn't like this, so he starts throwing Bible verses and curses at Eric. Eric's face is flushed with anger and protection. He screams that David is to stay at least 100 miles away from me, and if and when he finds that he's 99 miles away from me, he'll skin him like an animal. He then proceeds to hang up and hug me tightly. He reassured me that he never let that guy near me. A few days pass, and I start feeling weird, as if someone is watching me. It's dark and I'm just getting back from my finals. Something isn't right. I turn around to see a figure hiding behind a tree. I swear my legs reacted faster than my mind, because before I could even think about what I saw, I was already shutting the front door. To make matters worse, the house was pitch black, and no one was home. The first thing I do is check the side door, locked. Next, I scurry to the back door, and to my horror, it's slightly opened. The only thing on my mind at this point is F-U-C-K. I grab my dogs and hightail it to my bedroom and slam the door. No more than a second later, my dog starts going nuts. She's barking her friggin' head off, and my other dog is freaking the hell out. I'm sobbing my eyes out, calling Eric, holding on to my dogs, and all of a sudden, someone starts banging on my window. Katie, it's okay. What the fuck? It's David. He came at least 500 miles. somehow freakishly found my address and was now banging on my window. Just then, I hear someone shouting. My dad, who's a retired cop, is at my window on top of the guy. It turns out, my mom and dad were just getting home from a date when they had seen the weird car hidden behind the trees. My dad had decided to park the car in the street, leave the keys with my mom, and sneak around to see what was going on. It turns out that David had a gun with him, and if my dad hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened or come of the situation. Any one of us or all of us would have been dead. Thankfully, David is serving a lot of time in another state. My parents still live in that house, but by the time he gets out, they'll be happily sailing the coast. Retirement plans. And as for me, I live in a different county with the love of my life, who is now a cop. Volkswagen Beetle. Last night, I was taking my brother's friend home quite a ways from my house. My brother didn't come with us, so it was just a long, awkward but calm ride with my boyfriend and her. So we dropped her off and made our way back to the main road. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, so there were barely any cars on the road. But at the next light, we saw a purple Volkswagen Beetle sitting in the left turn lane. It could have been turning, but it was just sitting there. As we drove past, I saw a woman up against the window screaming, "Help!" I got really nervous and just slowed down but didn't stop. I could hear her wailing as we went further away. This woman was just screaming. It was like she was afraid of her life, and it chilled me to the core. My boyfriend wanted to keep going because it was so freaky, but I wasn't about to just drive on home knowing they needed help. I turned right at the next street and turned around so I could go back. As I made my way back to them, I had the worst feeling in my gut but continued on. I drove past the driver's side window to window, but they did not roll it down and I couldn't see anyone. I turned around to see we were facing the same direction I was on, the far right lane, and they were just sitting in the left turn lane. I rolled down my window, and this woman has already rolled hers down and began screaming. Again, with the same blood-curdling screams as before. She's saying, "No, don't do it," and finally, "Don't stop." When I heard "don't stop," I immediately thought back to stories I had read online about people being set up to be killed or kidnapped by gang members or psychos by looking like they had broken down or something, so I took off. I don't even remember if the light was green, but I took off. I called 911, and when I looked up in the rear view, they had turned their lights off but were still sitting there. I told them everything and went home. I stayed up all night wondering if I'd been followed or if that woman got hurt. The way she was screaming will be forever burned into my memory. My mother's nightmare. This is pretty lengthy. I've never told the full story. My friends only know bits and pieces, but it has been on my mind quite a lot lately. Typing this out has felt cathartic, so thank you to anyone who has taken the time to read it in full. It all started when I was 9 or 10. My mother had a friend named Matthew. I guess they had a falling out, but clearly I was too young to understand what had happened. Usually after school, my brother and I would beat my mother home and she would join us no more than an hour later. One day, we heard a knock on the door, and there was Matthew. He had flowers and a wrapped gift. He said he wanted to leave our mother a surprise, and it would be our little secret. We thought he was still a family friend. We thought he could be trusted, and we were wrong. When my mother came home, she went ballistic. Her room was destroyed. The mirror that came attached to her headboard was shattered. Her glasses snapped in two, and her underwear drawer was ransacked. After we told her the afternoon visitor, she warned us that we were never allowed to let him in, and if he comes again, call her and go to the apartment office and wait for the police. He never came back again while we were home. However, That didn't mean he never visited us again. We would come home to the lights all turned on, our drawers and cabinets opened. A few times there were eyes drawn on the walls, a reminder that he was always watching. Sometimes there'd be phone calls where it was clear there was someone on the line. No words would be spoken, though. One of the nights we came home, everything was a mess, and only one light was on in the living room. In the light were 2 glasses that came with my mother's brandy set. One of the glasses was full of the expensive brandy, and the other was empty, but it was clear it had been full at one point. This was the night my brother decided to leave us and join my dad in another state. After that, it was just my mother and I. Since it was just us 2 ladies, she decided we should move and try a fresh start where the psycho couldn't find us. We moved about 4 to 5 times overall, and each time, he would always find us. The house would be broken into, notes would be found. By the time I was 13 years old, my mother had finally decided to buy a house. Her first since she and my father divorced. We hadn't heard from Matthew in months and thought it was over. I began being able to sleep at night. I wasn't terrified of being alone anymore. Cars driving by our house didn't make me jump or my skin crawl. I felt comfortable for the first time in years. But that was short-lived. Matthew always made sure of that. There was a new kid at my school, and as soon as I saw him, my heart sank because I knew what he meant. He was Matthew's son, and I'd only met him once before. But I knew if he was there, that meant his father was near as well. My comfort, my safety, my life, it all fell apart. In some strange wisdom beyond my simple 13 years, I decided that his son didn't have to know his father's crimes. It was not his burden, so I was nice to him. I showed him around the school, even though the whole time doing so, I wanted to throw up. I told my mom as soon as I got home, and I could see the fear, even though she tried to put on a brave face for me. She told me not to worry, and to keep being nice to his son because it wasn't his fault. So the burden of his father became mine once again. The next day, the kid said hi to me and asked me how I got to school every day. I avoided answering what must have been an innocent question to him, but that bit of privacy meant so much to me. But he then said, "You live by the park, right? You probably walk. My dad told me that's where you and your mom live." As soon as that simple statement was uttered, I knew that it meant it was going to start again. The break-ins, the missing items, the drawings on the walls. We moved around so much to get away from this. That home felt like home. We made a life there. But in that moment, it felt like a prison because it was easier to pack up an apartment and leave when this happened. It wasn't so simple now. One evening, I had invited my basketball team over for a sleepover and bonding time. My mom had left to go grab pizza and some things from Walmart that we had forgotten. We had baked earlier, so the back door that was attached to the basement was propped open to air it out a bit. The girls and I went down to the basement to have a dance party and play games. When my mom got home, all she did was scream, and I was scared that maybe we had left a burner on or the stove on or something. Nope. It was her bedroom. It was trashed yet again. The back door was completely open and there were muddy footprints guiding the way to her room. He took photographs, glasses, her rings, her underwear. It was like nothing was left untouched. The thing that scares me the most is that we were just 1 floor down and didn't hear a sound. My mom was only gone for around 45 minutes, which as an adult, looking back, makes me think he was sitting outside our house, just watching and waiting for my mother to leave. There were more instances after this. The phone calls had begun once again. Our ladder was taken from our garage and propped in the backyard under my mother's window. We would find the ladder propped up in the morning, after school, just at random times that didn't make sense. We eventually got rid of the ladder and would just borrow our neighbors if we ever really needed to use one. We had called the police, but they weren't much help because we didn't have much proof that it was him. We just knew. My mother was eventually awarded a restraining order, and that somewhat helped. I eventually moved, and even now in my 20s, I still deal with nightmares of him. I get scared when visiting my mother. I'll run into him. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet. My brother, however, has seen him, and my brother is the strongest guy I know. And hearing the frustration was the hardest thing for me. I don't think this man realizes how much he fucked up my childhood, how terrified I was and still am. I have a hard time picking up phone calls on the house phone and answering the door when I'm alone so many years later. He still has power over my family, but luckily, these instances no longer happen. It has been many years since he last broke into my mother's home.